My name is Jack Bobo. I'm the director of the Food Systems Institute at the University of Nottingham, and I was going to talk about can agriculture save the planet, but I just thought I'd tell you how we save the planet and skip all the formalities. So I think we're all here because the problems we face, they're big, they're complex, and they're global, and they relate to food, they relate to energy, they relate to all sorts of challenges that we face. And I think if I asked you what's the most important thing for solving these problems, most of us would probably say it's collaboration. These complex problems require collaboration, people coming together in order to solve them. And in order to do that, though, how we communicate matters. The problem is today, how we communicate more often polarizes the audiences than brings them together. And so for me, the single biggest threat to our future is our inability to communicate and our inability to bring people together. And so I want to use the example of agriculture to talk about that. Now, some of you may have heard this idea that our food system is broken. Anybody hear that? I hear it a lot from farmers. The question is, well, if our food system is broken, when was it not broken? Was it better 20 years ago, 40, 60? Well, this is how we talk about it, though. And so, just as an example, 40% of all the land on Earth that could be used for agriculture is being used for agriculture today. The amount of cropland is the size of South America, the amount of pasture land the size of Africa. Nothing more important than agriculture for land. 70% of all fresh water goes to agriculture. This is the Colorado River, the 5th largest river in America, no longer flows to the sea, largely because of agricultural withdrawals. If we were to talk about climate change, 10 to 15% of all greenhouse gases come from agriculture. Another 10 to 15% come from deforestation, 80% of which is caused by agriculture. It's almost as much as energy, more than anything else, absolute disaster. This is why people are talking about agriculture is the problem. And so when people think about agriculture, they think things are bad, they're getting worse, and we're the problem. Farmers are the problem, food companies are the problem, and consumers are the problem. And the problem with this is how we're framing the conversation. Everybody who needs to change is the problem. And most people, when you tell them they're the problem, they don't say, oh, you know, you're right, let me change. I just didn't know, man. And so let me talk about what talking about this differently could look like. So 800 million people will go to bed hungry today, absolutely unacceptable in this world today. And we're focused on this moment. So everything I've talked to you about is true and real in the problems today, but 10% of the people are going to bed hungry. 30 years ago, that was 20% of all the people on Earth. 60 years ago, it was 30% of all the people on Earth. So things aren't just better, they're wildly better in many ways. We're at childhood mortality, lowest point in all of human history. So how we think, we have to understand where we've come from to appreciate where we are, to plan for where we want to go. And so I would suggest that in terms of agriculture, things are not bad and getting worse. They're good and getting better, but not fast enough. And that is a very, very different challenge than agriculture is broken. The question is, how can we help the people in agriculture do better faster? How do we get to our 2070 goals by 2050? How do we get to our 2050 goals by 2030? What can I do to make your job easier? People respond much better to that. How we communicate matters. I'll translate this to another sector. If we were talking about CO2 emissions here in the UK, 5.5 tons per person, absolutely terrible, higher than the global average, 150-year low, and dropping fast. If you don't know where you've come from, it's hard to understand where you're going. Context matters. And so that's part of the challenge that we have, is that we don't understand, and people don't understand, in many ways, how the improvement that we've made, and so they feel depressed about the future instead of excited about the future and wanting to get up and do more better tomorrow. We're going from 8 to 9.5 billion people. That's a challenge, of course, but most people stop thinking about the future in 2050, and yet after 2050, population growth slows dramatically because we have already reached peak child. The number of children born next year will be less than this year, and less the year after that, the year after that, and the year after that. And so the next 25 years will determine the fate of the planet, but what will really determine it is how we talk about the future. Thank you very much.